When 9 out of 10 people on Earth have stopped eating meat, not because of a law, not because of a war. It's just a shift, a tipping point. The vegans would celebrate, the ranchers would panic, the economists would reach for their spreadsheets, but here is what nobody would see coming. The winners would not be who you expect. The losers would not be who you expect. The planet would do something extraordinary that almost nobody has predicted. Today on Flipverse, what if 90% of the world went vegetarian? We are mapping the full economic, financial, and natural scenario, and the truth is wilder than either side of the argument wants you to know. Let's flip this. First, understand the scale of what we are dismantling. The global meat market generates $1.55 trillion in revenue in 2025. That is not a niche industry. That is an economy larger than the GDP of most countries on Earth. Livestock accounts for about 40% of agricultural production in rich countries. It is vital economically and nutritionally to the lives of 1.3 billion people across the world, according to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. Now here is what happens to that $1.5 trillion on day one of the vegetarian world. It does not disappear, it migrates. The calories and protein that humanity needs don't vanish. They move from animals to plants, from beef and chicken to lentils, soy, quinoa, peas, mushrooms, from feedlots to farms. The question is not whether people will eat. The question is who wins and who loses in the migration of $1.5 trillion across the global food system in the space of a generation. And the answer is deeply uncomfortable for everyone involved. Let's talk about who gets rich in this scenario. The first winners are not the small organic farms you are imagining. They are the corporations that already saw this coming. Plant-based protein is a $30 billion industry today. In the 90% vegetarian world, it becomes the new meat. The companies that control the supply chains for soy, peas, legumes, and alternative protein manufacturing inherit the $1.5 trillion market that beef and chicken left behind. Second winners are pharmaceuticals. In a world where switching to a plant-based diet reduces disease incidence by more than 55%. That sounds like good news, and it is for individuals. But here is the flip. The pharmaceutical industry generates hundreds of billions of dollars annually from chronic disease management. A healthier population consuming fewer processed animal products eats into that revenue. The health system gets better. The companies profiting from illness get poorer. The third winners are the countries with the land, the water, and the agricultural infrastructure to scale plant protein production rapidly. India, and already the world's largest producer of lentils and pulses, Brazil, if it stops burning the Amazon for cattle and redirects that land to soy for human consumption rather than animal feed. The Netherlands, already the world's second largest food exporter by value, deeply invested in precision agriculture. These countries don't just survive the vegetarian transition, they lead it. Now the flip side, and this is where the scenario gets genuinely dark. The economic damage from the sudden disappearance of meat would fall disproportionately on low-income countries with agrarian economies. In Niger, the livestock industry makes up about 13% of the country's GDP. For Kenya, for Ethiopia, for large parts of sub-Saharan Africa, farming and raising livestock are not just industries, they are survival systems. When the $1.5 trillion migrates toward plant protein, it does not migrate toward Niger. It migrates toward the industrial agricultural corporations that already have the infrastructure to scale. The vegetarian world in this scenario does not make the world more equal. It potentially makes it less equal, concentrating food system wealth in the hands of large-scale plant agriculture corporations while destroying the livelihoods of the world's poorest pastoral communities. And then there's Australia, Argentina, New Zealand, the United States Midwest, entire national identities and rural economies built around beef and livestock. When ranchers and farmers suffer economic distress, it dissolves the ties that hold their communities together. The rural towns built around the meatpacking plant, the feed grain farmer whose entire crop goes to livestock, the leather industry, the pharmaceutical industry that relies on animal byproducts. the gelatin in your medicine capsules, the collagen in your cosmetics, the fertilizer from animal waste that currently keeps crop yields viable. The vegetarian world does not just change what is on your plate. It restructures the entire supply chain of modern civilization. Now, the part that makes this scenario genuinely extraordinary. Researchers at the University of Oxford found that if everyone went vegan, global farmland use could be reduced by 75%, an area equivalent to the United States, China, Australia, and the EU combined. Read that again. 3/4 of the land currently used for food production, freed, shifting to vegetarian diets would reduce greenhouse gas emissions by an average of 35%, reduce land usage for food production by 42%, and agricultural water usage by 28%. But here is what makes this genuinely surprising. The freed land does not just sit there. Nature reclaims it, faster than almost any climate intervention humans have ever designed. Forests return, grasslands regenerate, rivers run cleaner as agricultural runoff drops. Species that were being crowded out by pasture and feedlot expansion begin recovering. The planet in this scenario begins a process of ecological recovery at a speed that no international climate agreement has ever come close to achieving. But here is the Flipverse catch. This ecological recovery does not happen uniformly. In the Amazon, where cattle ranching has driven decades of deforestation, the land can regenerate relatively quickly. In the American Midwest, where topsoil has been degraded by decades of industrial monoculture, corn and soy grown as animal feed, the land is already so damaged that simply removing livestock doesn't instantly restore it. It takes generations. The planet heals, but the healing is uneven, slow in some places and miraculous in others. And the communities that depended on the land are not there to see it. So here is the scenario nobody runs. What if the transition happens slowly, over 30 years instead of overnight? What if the economic disruption was managed with retraining, with land use transition programs, with deliberate support for the communities most exposed? What if the $1.5 trillion didn't just migrate to industrial plant corporations, but was redistributed toward regenerative farming, toward small-scale agriculture in developing countries, toward the communities currently most dependent on livestock? In that scenario, the vegetarian transition is not a disruption. It is the largest economic and ecological restructuring in human history. Managed well, it feeds more people, heals the planet, reduces disease, and creates new industries we cannot fully imagine yet. Managed badly, like most large economic transitions are managed, it makes corporations richer, destroys rural communities, increases global inequality, and delivers the ecological benefits while concentrating the financial benefits in the hands of the same people who already hold them. The question is never whether the world should change. The question is always who controls the transition and who gets left behind when it happens. 90% of the world going vegetarian would be the single largest behavioral shift in human history. It would heal parts of the planet we thought were beyond saving. It would destroy economies that millions of people depend on for survival. It would create industries we cannot yet name, and it would do all of this simultaneously, messily, unevenly, with winners and losers scattered across every continent and every income bracket. The planet does not care about the economics. The economics do not care about the planet. And the 1.3 billion people whose survival depends on livestock, they are waiting to see which one wins. This is Flipverse. Flip the scenario. See the truth. Tell me in the comments. In this scenario, which side are you on? And which part of this transition do you think the world is least prepared for?